going to first start out with Dan Hibshman, who's going to read a couple stories, and then Bill Ray is going to read his poem that's called The Willits Farewell. I want you to know that it's a long poem, so be ready for it. It's not going to end in 5 minutes. Okay, just be ready for it and relax and enjoy it. After Bill finishes, then we're going to take a break, have some cookies and some wine, if I can get it together. And then after that, we'll come back and have an open reading. So that's how the evening's going to go, and I'm going to start things off by introducing Mr. Dan Hibshman. I think the main thing to say about Dan that I want to pass on is that Dan is a longtime resident of Mendocino County. He lived up in the Cherry Creek area for many years. Lived in Willits for several years. He's been living in Ukiah, and he has 2 books that have been recently published. I think I believe it was in 2021. He published a book called Disquiet, which was about sort of roughly based on his experiences in the Mendocino County Law Library. And then just last year, he published a book called Of a Lifetime, Stories, 1963, 2023. It's a long time of a lifetime. So without any further ado, Dan Hibshman.
Thank you, Mike. I'm not sure what to say in my introduction since he just told you everything that I was intending to say. I suppose there are other things I'll come up with. First of all, to thank Mike. I've known him kind of at a distance, but for quite a long time. And it only recently I was reminded that he and I were in a play together in Ukiah Players Theatre, a David Mamet play called Glengarry Glen Ross.
Let's hear it from David Mamet! Woo! Fuck yeah!
A lot of fun to act in, and nice memory of things I've done with Mike Adair. I think it's historically accurate to say that I was present at the creation of Willits Community Theatre. I was in several plays, first at the Grange, then at the Methodist Church. In The Miracle Worker, I had the very minor role of Helen Keller's brother. And Henry Shevitz is here tonight, I'm glad to see, along with other folks I've known over many years. Henry was in plays with me with Willits Community Theatre quite a while before this wonderful space was yours. I also want to thank Bill Ray. Bill made the connection to Mike that led to Mike inviting me to be on the program here this evening. I've known Bill via various connections over a lot of years, and I'm honored to open tonight's program on an evening which is rightfully his as the main attraction.
No.
In the early 80s, I lived for about 5 years in Willits, a very short distance west of here. I lived with the woman who was my wife at that time, her daughter, and our daughter. Both girls were young. For about 5 years before that, as Mike has already told you, we lived on a piece of land on the Covelo Road, and when we needed to go to town, Willits was town. The girls were even younger then, of course. In fact, Mills Matheson delivered our daughter at the old Howard Hospital on Christmas Eve, 1975. Wow. I'm in front of you tonight because You gave it all away. I've been promoting a book of my stories called Of a Lifetime, which was published in September of last year. You could buy it if you're interested. I happen to have brought a few copies to make them available, should you be so inclined. But I'm also mentioning the book because I'll make references to it as I introduce the two stories I'm going to read. Within the 20-some pieces in the book, 3 blocks of stories are connected. One is a group of 4 separate short stories I call the Nathan and Rebecca stories. The 2 main characters in all 4 are a divorced father and his daughter who lives with him part of the time. The story I'd like to read is called Catch. A couple of quick notes about it before I begin. I grew up in Ohio. My father's name was Ben. Granny Hamner was an infielder in the 1950s with the Philadelphia Phillies. That's what you need to know before I begin. So, catch. Nathan and Rebecca were playing catch. "I throw like a girl," she said, faintly disgusted. "Girls can throw perfectly fine," said Nathan. He broke the motion down for her. Stepping forward onto the left leg, they were both right-handed, then getting shoulder, elbow, wrist, and fingertips all into one smooth throw. Rebecca was a good athlete whose success at this point in her young life was all coming from soccer, a sport that never existed in Nathan's childhood. Riding the wave of its new popularity, Rebecca had been playing for 6 years. She molded her natural coordination, intelligence, and stamina into more and more polished soccer skills. Since he'd never played the game, there was irony in Nathan's becoming the coach of her soccer team. Actually, though, he was confident he could coach almost any kid's sport. Back when he taught 5th grade, years before he knew Rebecca's mom, he loved coaching the boys' teams after school, flag football and basketball. As the girls' soccer coach, he inveighed against giggliness, yelled a lot from the sidelines during games, got respectable results. The other girls laughed at his jokes, but also maybe found him odd. He believed Rebecca, without saying so, was proud of her dad. Nathan had made a start at teaching her tennis. They'd watch some basketball on TV, but those ventures into other sports weren't going anywhere for her until this year, after soccer season, when 2 of her friends drew her onto a basketball team. Right away, Rebecca began to take dribbling, foul shots, defense, and the rest very seriously. After that came her sudden interest in softball. He signed her up for a team of 12 to 14-year-olds in a league sponsored by local businesses. Because it was precisely the season for an upswing in demand, a huge mound of mitts overflowed in aisle 12A at Payless Drug. Nathan was often uncomfortable shopping, but it was fine to be doing it now with and for his daughter. He worked his way through the pile, fitting one after another stiff glove onto her innocent hand. At first, it seemed she was applying the same standards that went with Guess jeans and Esprit sweaters. The mitt's color mattered supremely. But he could tell she was concerned also about its pocket, its webbing, that feel of how well it would catch a ball. Full of memory at the same time as advising her, Nathan thought the Cooper Deep Scoop model she eventually picked was the right choice. It felt good on his hand, too. He was remembering his old Granny Hamner, all those games on the playground of Fernway School and in the street on Maynard Road. Rebecca's mitt carried no autograph, but there was lots of lettering even so. It said it was in the Pro Diamond series, made of both top-grade American hide and soft-tanned steer hide. At the checkout, he put on an act of being gruff. "You better not lose this," he warned her, letting no trace of his pleasure show. Rebecca knew he was joking, but didn't laugh. "I expected to be your glove for a long time." The checkout girl overheard and looked up briefly at Nathan. He sensed this as he stared at and folded the credit card receipt. "That girl shouldn't have been listening," Rebecca said on the way home. "She made me embarrassed." "Oh, I probably should have waited to tell you that someplace else," he admitted. "But can you imagine if you stood there all day, the many things you'd hear people say?" He looked over at her, quiet in the passenger seat. "Anyway, I did mean what I said. The way you move around and trade clothes and stuff with your friends, I can see you leaving this mitt lying around." She was listening. "And when you're out on the field, don't just toss it down and forget about it, because it won't be there when you come back." Back in their house, the glove in its newness was a weirdly beautiful American object, complex in its stitching, made in Taiwan. Naturally, they'd bought a softball too, a big round thing that emerged perfect from its cardboard box. Nathan laughed as he watched Rebecca start molding the thick fingers and pocket with the ball. "What's so funny, mister?" she asked, with the playful fierceness she'd learned from him. "Oh, I just get a kick out of watching you do that. I think you're really going to like playing with it." He told her how, back in Ohio, we used to oil the mitts and tie the ball up in the pocket over the winter. He played softball only a handful of times since that afternoon years earlier, when a runner sliding into third base broke Nathan's right ankle. It was a city league game. Phyllis was pregnant with Rebecca then. The throw from center field was sure to get there just ahead of the runner, and Nathan was in position to block the bag. That attempt at glory cost him the orthopedist, the anesthetist, the hospital, plus some indefinable expense for what he came to see as the crunching end of youth. His right shoulder hadn't suffered a specific injury as drastic as the ankles, but somehow it had gotten damaged too. Playing catch now with Rebecca, he could feel the strain. And later, reaching down to launch pop-ups straight above them as high as he could, he wrenched the shoulder another way. Ben, their old cat, strolled out and lay down in the driveway between Nathan and Rebecca and rolled onto his side. "Just what do you think you're doing, Benjamin?" Rebecca asked him with belligerent love. "Don't you know you could get hurt lying there like that?" She pressed the ball against his belly, and he swiped at it with his paws. The game of catch continued in the air above the cat. Nathan caught her throws with bare hands. Later, he borrowed the new mitt so Rebecca could practice throwing her hardest. The return throws, he aimed so they'd reach her on one bounce. "I taught Jose Canseco how to hit, you know," Nathan said. One of their already old memories was of the time Rebecca's friend Leah believed Nathan when he told her, "I taught Elvis how to sing." "If you were so great," she said, "how come you're not famous?" "Rotten luck, the worst kind of plain bad luck." He paused before he threw. "Actually, I never said I was so great, just that I taught them. And you know, it's probably just as well that I didn't get to be famous, because then I probably wouldn't have been around to teach you." On Saturday morning, Nathan and Rebecca played catch in the driveway for a few minutes before it was time to go and meet Phyllis. The X's had a meeting place close to halfway between their two towns, a convenient and symbolic place for Rebecca to pass from one parent to the other. "Are you going to take your mitt with you?" he asked when it was time to go. "Yep," she said. But when Nathan returned after the exchange to take up his weekend of single living, he discovered the mitt, ball in pocket, still on the couch. Sometimes he'd be reminded of the pressure put on Rebecca by living in two places. Among other ripples in the wake of their divorce, the parents expected her to become a good packer, to learn to take with her the clothes and other things she'd need, items other kids could simply leave at home. Resilient and good-natured, Rebecca responded quite well to this demand, and with minimal direction managed her business of commuting. She did forget things sometimes. Nathan had a way of being critical, but checked himself then, conscious of the split-up's injustice. Of course, the mitt and the ball weren't essentials. He thought she'd be sorry or annoyed with herself when she discovered their absence, but it wouldn't ruin her weekend. He picked up the mitt and wriggled his fingers into it, snapped the ball into the pocket, flipped the ball back to his bare hand, repeated the motion again and again. There was the old smacking sound on leather and the tingling feel on his skin. Over Maynard Road, the topmost reaches of the elms from both sides of the street met in cathedral grace high above the pavement. Young Nathan's shoulder could dip, twist, and fire high ones straight up to those leaves, the ball taking long seconds to rise and finally fall to earth into his mitt. And Nathan remembered his father, placed on the permanently disabled list by multiple sclerosis. Ben hanging his cane on the fence along an edge of the backyard, then throwing pop-ups unsteadily for Nathan and his brother to catch. The phone rang. Most weekends were too quiet without Rebecca, and he pronounced his hello with a certain hopefulness. "Hi, Dad?" She had a way of saying it as a question. "Hi, Beck. Gee, it's been a long time." "You are so strange. Did I leave my mitt there?" "No," he said. "I didn't? Well, that's weird, because I thought I brought it with me. But then when I was unpacking, it wasn't there, so I must have left it. Are you sure? Like, could you look in the car?" "Okay, just a minute." He set the phone down on the table, but stayed where he was. He waited quietly for a time, then picked up the phone and said, "I found it." "In the car?" "No. You know that orange cat next door?" "Yeah. Ben and him were playing catch." "Dad, actually, you want to know where it was?" "Yes, tell me." "It was on my hand." I've written stories pretty much my whole life, which by now has gotten to be a pretty long time. I'm not counting stories with the meaning of reportage, journalism, which I did in Mendocino County for a bunch of years. I'm talking about writing works of fiction, also about writing memoirs. I started these and worked on them over many years. From time to time, I made lists of what I'd written, trying to envision them in print, but I knew they were all in various stages of unfinished. The would-be collection languished in cardboard boxes. In 2020, after working for about 15 years part-time in the Mendocino County Law Library, which is in the courthouse in Ukiah, I completed a series of newer stories, all fiction, but all based on that experience. I actually finished them because I had discovered it was possible to self-publish, an online procedure that results in real hold-in-the-hand books. The product is said to be print on demand. After someone orders a copy on Amazon, it's printed and delivered to them. My friend in Ukiah, Dan Barth, who's in the audience here somewhere tonight, he introduced me to this technology while he navigated the process of creating Disquiet, which is what the Law Library Stories book is called. After that, I was definitely inspired to do more of the same. Dan encouraged me to believe I could do it, manage the process on my own, and that's what I did. Of a Lifetime is a collection of stories I've written over that pretty long time. You know, the two towns where Rebecca lives in the Nathan and Rebecca stories are not named in Catch, but the other three stories identify them as Willits and Ukiah. Willits also figures in quite a few other stories in the book. Sometimes it's called by that name, in others it's given a fictional one. When I first imagined reading my work at this specific location, I immediately thought of my story In the Lane. It takes place primarily in one of those back passageways that cut through the blocks of this part of town. A man named Jason encounters a woman named Marcy. Both of them are married with children. However, I realize that that story is far too long to deliver to an audience, so I changed my mind about reading it here tonight. I truly hope you'd be interested in reading it for yourself sometime. Meanwhile, I'm quite happy to read another much shorter and much simpler story that in the book comes right after In the Lane and is set in the same Willits neighborhood. It's narrated by Jason, called Lost Puppy. I know it's here somewhere. Lost Puppy. I'm working in the garden. The tomatoes keep putting out so much foliage that they don't really need, so I'm pinching back new shoots and wondering when the little green balls will ever get big and red. Jenny and Rabbit and their friend Tanya come bouncing through the front gate. They're laughing and squealing and looking down at their little sneakers where there's a puppy running with them, a black scurrying bundle. "Dad," shouts Rabbit in delighted frustration, "this dog won't stop following us." The three girls range over the grass, and the puppy speeds and loops among them. I'm thinking of the neighbor dogs whose shortest routes take them right through the garden on the way to nowhere. I find their fat prints indenting the beds, and cat calling cards in stinking piles on the soil. "Well, he can't stay in here." "What are we supposed to do?" Jenny says. "He won't leave us alone." Her voice breaks a little with the maddening of the situation. Running away is the pup's invitation to chase and romp. Tanya kneels and hugs him. His pink tongue is a dart of love. "Whose is he?" "We don't know," says Tanya with a huge shrug. There's a startling huskiness in her 6-year-old voice. She has a look I've seen before when she doesn't know, a not quite convincing innocence. "He just followed us over from my house." "Well, then that's where you should take him back to. Somebody's probably looking for him." That satisfies them. They run out through the gate. "Come on, little puppy, come on," Jenny says. It takes the puppy a few seconds to register the change, then he charges after them. His pads make a brisk sound of friction on pavement. A few minutes later, Rabbit and Jenny enter stealthily through the back gate from the lane behind our house. They're tiptoeing and trading stage whispers when they look up to see me watching them. "Did you find out who he belongs to?" "No, but we escaped him," says Rabbit with serious satisfaction. Then she leaps to the next subject with the rabbit. "Can we watch TV?" I think about it, but not long. "No, later. Stay outside some more. It's too nice to be inside." Then the puppy hurries in from the front. "Oh no," Rabbit says. "Puppy!" The word has become its name, and she's second syllable hanging down in distress. I begin to feel that I'm inheriting a problem. "Didn't you take him back by Tanya's?" "Yes, but there wasn't anybody there," says Jenny, sincere and vexed. Is all I can say for a while. In between its bounds up against the girl's knees, it looks at me with a quiver of being lost. They're not lost, but the girls look it too, with big eyes appealing to me. "No, puppy!" Frustration outpoints affection in Rabbit. She slaps it down from a climb up her leg and stomps away. "This puppy is bugging me," she announces with a hint of tears. "Daddy," says Jen, as I look forlornly back at the tomatoes, "this puppy is bugging us." "No, puppy!" The mantle of responsibility has draped itself around me. "Okay," I say slowly, trudging out of the bed. "Guess maybe you guys should go inside and you can watch TV." That's all they need to hear, and the problem is all mine. The puppy really is cute. Are Cocker Spaniels ever black? Its coat is long and shiny. Its eyes shine too. The little legs can make time, and the tail is a blur of excitement. "Come on, pup." I walk past it and out to the street. It gets the idea almost immediately and follows me, then starts up the sidewalk the wrong way. I'm feeling my way into this job like a cop or a reporter. have to make sure I don't get too involved. I figure he's picking up on everything, how I smell and how I stand, as much as what I say and how it sounds. He's sharper than a kid, probably, and can pick out signals a baby's senseless to. I've got to talk nice enough to get him to follow, but not nearly so likable that he imprints me in his almost blank memory bank. So I walk toward Tanya's, quite willing to let him scamper away if he's inclined to, but fairly sure that where I go, he'll go. I cross Redwood Avenue, and the lady behind the wheel of the stop Dodge on School Street smiles benignly at the man walking his cute black puppy. Invisible lines of command are in place without effort. He adjusts perfectly to my pace and direction. I wonder if he knows that part of me is enjoying this. We turn up Albion Street. Past the big house on the corner is Tanya's, but nobody's around. We wait in front of her house, while out of the corner of my eye I watch to see what he's inclined to. This sidewalk doesn't seem to smell any more of home than the rest we've covered. No yips or turnarounds, just readiness to obey my feet. Albion Street is so narrow. On the other side, the big brown Baptist church seems huge the way it hovers just above the sidewalk. I picture the sign in front giving times of services and announcing this week's sermon. Am I this puppy's keeper? I'm not in a hurry. The street is empty and quiet until the door opens behind me. Tanya comes out and closes the door with unusual care. Someone is sleeping inside? She just got chewed out? It seems absurd to say hello as if we were adult strangers passing on the street. I see her constantly, and besides, she's 6. Whose dog is this? She doesn't need small talk either. I think maybe it's Shelley's. Tanya is chunky and healthy and has a dogged style. She leans her elbows on the porch rail above me and bounces on one foot. She was going to come over to play this afternoon, but her brother got in a fight at school and she has to stay home. I'm trying to cut through the extraneous. Where does she live? Over there. She points beyond this street to another, higher up. I think, someplace over there. I don't know which house exactly. Did Shelley come by here with the puppy? No. How'd you find it? I didn't. This girl comes up in front of the church and says, "Want a dog?" And I just looked at her, and then she put the puppy down on the sidewalk and she ran away. Was it Shelley? No. Did you know her? I think I've seen her. How did you know it was Shelley's dog? I don't know. I look at the puppy. He's sitting now with his tail taping the crack in the sidewalk. Tanya skips down the porch steps and keeps going. I gotta go to the store. I think, stay close to home. We may want to ask you more questions. Tanya's folks like American flags for curtains. They haven't been friendly when I've come over to get Jenny and Rabbit. About 80% of the time, the kids all play at our house, and Tanya and Gail and Susan, her sisters, never seem to have to go home. They're good kids. I walk up the block. He's right with me. A big redwood is lifting the sidewalk near the corner of South Street. He wets down a root. No one's around. We wait on the corner. I'm not going to knock on doors to find Shelley or anybody else. Why me? Between Albion and Redwood Ave, South Street drops steeply. As I turn to go down that block, it feels at first like I'm giving up. But actually, the corner of South and Redwood has a busier air. 4-way stop, school buses, fewer trees. We'll wait there. And now I'm thinking, if fate is just going to drop this dog in my lap, I can keep it, I suppose, take care of it. The kids would love it. I would too. We probably should have more animals now that they're big enough to feed them. But I don't let this on to the pup. I'm still cool towards him. No encouragement. I'd rather give him back. Just then, Gail steps out of the house I'm standing in front of. Gail, Tanya's sister. "Hi, Jason," she says brightly. She's got a purplish bruise and puffiness around her right eye. "Hi, Gail." I'd probably avoid it with an adult, but I ask, "What happened to your eye?" "Huh? Oh, I don't know. I think maybe it's poison oak." It doesn't look like poison oak. I wonder if somebody hit her. Gail's the brightest of the three sisters. She's got her workbooks under her arm. They're all big-boned and sort of pretty. Matisse women to be, but in sharper focus, very down to earth. "Do you know whose puppy this is?" "Oh," she says, bending toward him. "He's so cute." He's been following the kids around, but nobody knows where he belongs. "He could be Sarah's. They have a dog that looks sort of like this one. Did you go over there?" "Where?" "They live down that way." It's the opposite direction from Shelley's. Tanya and Gail abhor an information vacuum. They would rather say something. "What are you going to do with him?" Now it's my turn to say, "I don't know." Then I just don't want him to be lost. She says, "Well, I got to go home." She starts up the steep sidewalk. The puppy follows her. I don't see a way to sneak off, but it's not because I'm not looking for one. "Oh no, little puppy, you can't come with me." She talks like Dick and Jane used to talk to Spot. It's pure and honest. But now she's more upset. She walks back down to the corner and lovingly scolds him. "Now you have to stay right here," she says with a finger. He's right after her again. She turns and backs up the hill, slightly bent over and knees together. "No, puppy!" This comes out as a cry, nearly, and she looks helplessly at me. I haven't tried to shake him, but I know I'm letting the burden swing onto her. That's not right. I start toward the corner to draw him back. Suddenly, this woman is there. She's come down the hill. She sweeps him up into her cradle of arms. "You naughty puppy, where were you?" I think it's marvelous, and Gail doesn't mind either. I expect the woman to say something to me, but she's already turned to go back up the sidewalk. Gail and I follow her big behind in its stretch fabric cover. Gail and the carrying of her bundle make her waddle. "Well, that was good luck," I say loudly to Gail, still expecting the woman to pick up on it too. She's right in front of us. But she turns around the redwood tree onto Albion Street without a word or a nod. Gail and I walk side by side, still following, but quiet now. A knot of kids is in front of her house and in the street. Tanya's talking tough to a boy on a bike. Susan, the biggest sister, yells from the porch, "You better tell your brother not to come down this street no more." Gail wades in. Then a garbled call and the wave of a man standing in the church driveway seemed to be aimed at me. The call sounds like, "Charlie," and the wave says, "Thanks." He's with a few others in a close circle of big people, including the woman with the puppy. I smile at them and nod broadly, then shortcut down the lane back to our house.
Well, our next reader is Bill Ray. You already know probably enough. Come on, Bill. Come on up and read.
Hard to argue with that introduction. Well, everybody's having a good time.
Yeah.
It's a good time of year. The earth deities are telling Persephone to get the hell up and start growing flowers and stuff, and she's doing it. I want to say that my colleague 38 years ago gave a reading at the County Museum. Also having to do with the region. And his colleague, co-reader at that time, was the estimable artist and poetess, Robin Rule. The wheel of truth and beauty keeps on rolling. Robin, our own program October 12th here. I wanted to say also that I owe a debt of love to Judith Ann Hiegler Ray through her memory, and a similar debt of love to Nancy Ann Trickler, her presence here tonight. I know you won't tell anybody about this, but the Rebecca and Phyllis of Dan's story was actually Nan and Naomi. So Dan's muse became my muse. And that's a miracle of love. This longish poem has a epigraph at the beginning and also after the end. The epigraph at the beginning is by A.E. Housman, a 19th century English poet. A Shropshire Lad was the book, and there was a series of short poems. This was one of them. And the final epigraph is a fragment from a poem that I wrote in 1996. So let's begin. Into my heart, an air that kills from yon far country blows. What are those blue remembered hills? What spires, what farms are those? This is the land of lost content. I see it shining plain, the happy highways where I went and cannot come again. My wake-up ad hoc midnight threnody must serve as a collective farewell. To Mark and Ina Walker and her sister Mabel Black, he told me how to grease a wagon wheel and sharpen a scythe, and he gave me his first wife's, Edith's, carved missionary chest from Siam as his sign of regard. To Ed and Mary Hayes and their daughters living and dead, Ed sold me 3-foot-long virgin redwood shakes that covered the front of the house. Bertha Cook and her daughter Viva Pearson, who predicted rightly she would die before her century-old mother after leaving their land, once a nursery below Hilltop. And gentle Mary Pearson giving us leftover pizzas at Al's Redwood Room. Cliff Miller, his Main Street barbershop, his wife Thomasina, and the profusion of flower beds behind the house. Pretty little bastards, ain't they? Master mechanic Carl Carlson and his wife Winnie of Far Off Leggett, and their son Carl, maintaining a mountain colony's junks and dying too soon. Janice and Frank Rust, the millionaire DuPonts, he said life makes so much more sense the second or third time around. And later it was Frank and Sylvia who moved on to Hawaii, and she died there, but left me a restored memory, the old Chesapeake Bay amusement park, Glenecho and its huge mechanical laughing lady saying, ha, 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 forever. And Ellen Wormuth, the dream she told of reaching Rome just before her death, told me by her caretaker, the singer, the subtle poetess, Bonnie Coates Blackwell, who herself has preceded us in departure. And it was her blonde cousin Faith who had been my first love in Washington, D.C., 1954. And dear Ruby and Earl Snook, so generous and mild on East Hill Road, She's signaling me yet with the yellow tanager on the telephone wire every springtime. The old world Italian Degues and Berry Patch and Anna Collins on State Street. Now Sue Hathaway on the porch, her memory faded. Mills and Suzanne Matheson, along with Frank Rust, saving the valley from the biomass cancer disaster without fanfare, $5,000 each for a fight back EIR consultant. Elsie Allen, the legendary Pomo basket maker, who approved Judith's beginning turn of the reed. Self-reliant Mr. Winthrop Owen and his World War I wooden camp box set out for sale at a swap meet. Kathy Neff, of high religious devotion, keeping our daily bread going for years. Doc Watson, his wife cutting irises every April, and his over loud greeting, "Hoy hoy," an idiosyncratic coin of human discourse. Skilled Dale Justice, inevitably victim to Agent Orange, and not one word of bitterness. Zephyr Wagonette, the sad child who haunts me still from those years. Walter Camp, who scoffed at all authorities from the Bureau of Land Management to Sears and Roebuck, and died courageously, a brave soldier at home. Gerald and Miriam Ganley, their Ridge Wheel subdivision cabin in sight of the sea. Dale and Lorraine Cave, he who survived World War II in Korea, and she who took University of Portland chemistry classes from Linus Pauling in the 20s, attending with his future wife, to whom he would not give an A, if in so doing it risked his reputation. Jeanette Foy and all the proto-Indian Roys under their diminutive matriarch Mishtu. Jane Hara, the unassuming Pisces rancher and twin-engine pilot, who with her daughter Margie had assembled and cataloged a world-class seashell collection. The skilled pioneers Doug Surin, Ross Wilson, the Gaithers, Crow and Elena, Barry Eisenberg, staying over in the hollow beyond the Little Lake Cemetery where Judith's remains are buried, and Ralph Bostrom, living out his 90s at Northbrook Manor, who recalled his mother and aunt admonishing him, quote, "Ralphie, always remember that old man over there. He saw Abraham Lincoln." The German-born Burkharts of Shake City and their matriarch, Hannah, who did not back down when a mountain lion trespassed her clearing's lawn, saying to it, "You're a beautiful animal, but you're not wanted here." And it preened and walked away. Mrs. Sly, when I said I was a Jew, not a Christian, she replied, "Well, you're a good one." Steve Kaler and Kenny, who helped with the house, then migrated like Randy Abbott, the Flipperts, and the Jim Gibbonses to Hawaii for good. Brian Ardner, hoarsely calling on the phone as he approached the exit and bequeathed us his car. Devoted Frank and Cleva Centel, his forebears ancient Redwood Sawyers, whose family gave me their Riven Sherwood fire bell. Helen Moore Bartow, who took her horse to school in Willits before motor busing had begun. Bill and Marion Crispin, she newly married, had given the then child Judith fresh cookies in 1950s Boonville. She crashed and died driving home from Boonville on the way back to Willits. The Crows and Wagners, their uncanny tracking eyes in rifle range on Canyon Road in Pine Mountain, from Covelo to Cloverdale, known as the best hunters and fishermen in their time. Ouida Matthews, her rings and earrings, silver threads and golden needles. Mimi Shiner making a cloisonne talisman for Avra. Katie Silver's straw-packed tomato vines and her Lauren Bacall voice. Gordon Wagonette, who watched the Empire State Building go up a floor at a time, and when he attended Oberlin, the later world-famous political theorist Sheldon Wallen called him Tex. Mr. Way at 1650 East Hill, offering his garage full of windows and doors, sang his bossy new wife still thought she was a bride. And John Phillips giving me his sun-blanched all-heart redwood carriage house doors for our Japanese gate before he shot himself, shamed by an insurance fraud. Bob Brown witching our land to discover endless water throughout, then adamantly refusing the $50 fee. Roy and Lorraine Sullivan with their olives, her poetry, their children, tragedies, and love. The Montanan ex-boxer and hunting guide Harold Baldy Connerly at Ridgewood Ranch. I asked him if he was there at Shelby, Montana in 1923 when Dempsey bested Tommy Gibbons. He came back with, "Was I there? I was the undercard." Baldy, born on my mother's birthday and dying on mine. Frank Freitag, another elder, the Noyo theater projectionist, who also died on my birthday, his wife following 3 days later. The old man at the Seabiscuit Ranch, who told me in Arizona as a child in 1910 his parents woke him to view Halley's Comet transiting the entire sky. The collies, all four, Phil, Lena, Alita, Anita, caring to the end for the priests at St. Anthony's. Alita advising me once, "We have to protect our lovely little valley." Herb Pruitt, who had wired the nose cone of the Explorer 1 rocket and created the Exploratorium with Frank Oppenheimer, worked all night before the Mendocino County Museum's grand opening in 1972, and went to sleep on the grass across the street while the throng celebrated their triumph. Gil Holmes, the AAA tow truck driver, who as a youth back in Clayton, New Mexico, captured a rustler on their land and at gunpoint made him take off his boots and walk the desert range back to town. Jerry Caldwell, an inveterate political enemy who became a friend, clearing our karma in time before he fell asleep on Highway 101 and drifted off the road to his death. Mary V.O. Davis and Beth Rockefeller, educators like archetypal aunts, dying obscure, abandoned, and forgotten. Mary Frenzel saving Aubrey's high school career before uncomplaining she passed on. Steve Galecko with his violin lessons for Hannah and his gift of an old iron porch swing for me. Ironer Erickson, who was born in the Redwoods near Albion and gave me his first Willits choker setter job out on Sherwood. Annetta Corey Colin and her treasured pig, Priscilla. Bert Kroll, born 1903, his Santa Claus-like florid countenance and unflagging cheer. Scotty McBee, who gave me her green enameled milkshaker, hinting only of her past as a show dancer. The urbanites, Len and Beth Early, making a living with their cameras and pens. The Ridgewood restaurant waitresses, Mary Evans and Joe Plumley, embracing me the last day I drove the South 101 rural route. George Davis, the far-sighted football wrestling coach and English teacher, including in Propedeutica, his educational manual, a fictional protagonist based on her eldest daughter, Laura, and who ran across the Safeway parking lot to tell me what a great kid Ken was. Edith Page, playing the piano at the Grange meetings, and her husband, Wilson, running the dump up on Canyon, complete with scavenging bears. Jack Frost, last of the Willits gunfight lineage. Olaf Simonson taking on drifters in Koglo during the Depression, so everyone would survive, and he lived to be over 100 with 200,000 in the bank. Charlie Marshall, who in 1935 built what became our house using boards from a down-the-hill aging barn, and who asked me for a bag of soft cobbed corn because his teeth were gone. Mavis Bromagem leading the Cape Mendocino Wheeler pioneers who logged the coastal hills to ship home timber by boat. Luther Sherborne posthumously providing for Ewart Elms, his old Canadian fox tanner friend. Dolly Tyler's childish voice and joy opening her door at 175 Humboldt Street. The veteran Earl Spence and his constant companion, a silent little dog. Al Greenberg's Liquors, run by Eddie and Elvis Mills, she living on for decades to die in a Ukiah rest home. The Whiteds, the Cases, the Huffmans, the Sawyers up Sawyer's Lane. Del Weston selling his garden bounty by the road every year, and his widow Jerry mowing the following grass close to the earth. Ancient piano player B. Barnwell, small and still spry even as the fire went down, witness to William Jennings Bryan's 1920 oration at the theater when Lilburn Gibson arranged the stop at Willits. Willits pioneer scion Fred Van Bever, living to the last on California Street. The opera teacher Nadine and husband Bud Patton out Rock Tree Valley. Fred Finke, the piano tuner who played Liszt's Concerto No. 2 to warm up for his Rotary Club accomplishments, who was the one piano tuner Rachmaninoff demanded when he performed in 1930s San Francisco. He became a hero in the city when, witnessing a bank robbery, he foiled the villain by opening his tool bag and throwing tuning tools at him, who then panicked and ran out without the cash. Fred said he couldn't buy a meal in San Francisco after that because someone would always insist on paying his bill. Mike Compton, schooled in Rock Tree Valley in the teens, who lost 2 fingers at the mill the night he skipped the Grange meeting at the farm center, which still stands as a church, and who made sure we got the East Side Road house and property after I stopped to talk on a rainy day driving back to Berkeley. Blanche Shelton's shut-off upstairs, wildly inhabited with bats, and her nephew, Neil Sanders, who guarded his land like a backwoodsman of the 19th century. The dime-a-dip grain suppers picked and cooked by valley farmers until they got too old. Les and Zula Devine, he the war era Oakland police chief who refused Warren's decree to arrest all Japanese people. Old Joe Quadrail coming into the Happy Belly to buy pears, and his son Joe Jr. driving out with Hugh Hinchcliffe to check out our derelict electrical lines and exclaim, "Hugh, hold my hand." Ellis and Ethel Rugg, 60 years after delivering mail in a Model T out on Hearst in World War I, she insisted the government provided, he giving me his leather stamp pouch, now a century old. The Valonis, their perfectly ordered mill shack house and garden lined with broad abalone shells. Viva Erickson, Hattie London, Lily Hines, her lovely voice reciting the Grange initiations from memory. Frontier Days Grand Marshal Ethel Claddy, who stopped her saddle horse in the middle of the July 4th parade one year to kiss me at the sidewalk in front of JP's bar, and the drunks looked on grimly. Retired Judge and Mrs. Ford's smiles in humble dwelling near the Carnegie Library, and Mrs. Babcock's lonely days with drink after her husband had died. Burtis and Minta Martindale riding their ponies above Covelo all summer, and their daughter Opal living on past 90. Mrs. Cantrell, so warm and observing from her doorway with its authentic Bernard Maybeck light box. The exemplary school teacher, Thelma Sawyers, and Mr. Herman Vaughn, a distant relative cared for according to their country code of honor, her agreeing she liked her irises better than most people. Dink Persico, who advised me to spur a bronc only when he was off the ground, and Florence, who outlived every friend she had back in Salinas, dying at 99, and their sons, Chuck and Lee, who told a good story. The Hinchcliffs, just back from Nepal, starting the Symbols bookstore at the old soda works on San Francisco Street, only to quit it when a nightlife pickup plowed the building off its piers. Elbert Hucks, selling me Can't Bust 'em jeans, which recalled the tale of his youthful cattle rustling days in Laytonville in the 20s, when he took home a load of buckshot in his butt. The childless John and Anita Manganos, their immigrant Italian Catholic goodness, first to last, her siblings George, Virginia, Annette, and Edith Ricagno, Edie destined for world acclaim. Ray Burris and Ruth tending their foals and yearlings every spring that trotted shoulder to shoulder in delight. Stella James, the lady sharpshooter and horse wrangler, who hunted these ridges and lands. The way out on Hurst Road, Ramsings, Frances coming north summer since her early childhood. Clive and Jesse Adams at Emmendale, and Clive Jr., the joyous and imperturbable, and Tamara like newly baked bread, a soul for the future age. Delman and Donna Ford, the McKinleys, the Munsons, John and Jerry, dry farming, and Harold Ford mowing spring and fall, Jerry stripping on a hot day to glean the cut hay. She was a jewel of the valley. Lowell Alpers, United Airlines pilot and navigator, chief petty officer at 20 in World War II, who told me he was born on the plains but sought only one thing in his life, the sea. He wrote his mother every week, and a week after flying home from her funeral, he died in his sleep. Pre-World War I rodeo champion Don Coleman and wife Petey, whose Minnesota uncle cut Jesse James' saddle off his mount for a souvenir. They detested their 20s silent film rivals, Rudolph Valentino and Paula Negri, Don telling me in contempt, if a man could be pretty, he was pretty. They hosted their Montana boyhood friend Gary Cooper during the hot 1930s Willits summers, Gary busting down the dusty Hurst Road in his Duesenberg. Bing Crosby visiting the Howards at the thousands of acres Ridgewood Ranch, enjoying uninhibited nature outdoors and in. The Requas, the Elder Pinches, the Snyders, Butins, and Kavanaughs. Jesse Lawrenson of the Sheltons, they lived way up String Creek for 100 years where the income tax people would never find them. She was tying her boots one morning when an old oak crushed the corner of her bedroom. And Ron Berkowitz at the old log cabin school building there, who met Henry Miller during the war standing outside his Big Sur Partington Bridge door, a courtesy Miller noted by saying, "You're a nice man, you didn't want to intrude, come back anytime." And Ron went on to be the boy wonder on Wall Street and retired to the backcountry hills, saying, "I wasn't the first, I won't be the last. Goodbye, old paint, I'm leaving Cheyenne. So long, goodbye, take care, farewell to the Willits of my youth." Oh, spare and fictive life, gods and angels obscure. We look out upon the distances, we make ourselves the metaphor. But phantom song, the trace of sound, carries in flight unhindered. It does not drown.